On Christmas Eve, I discovered my husband was having an affair. His mistress was pregnant. And before I could even catch my breath, a strange man placed $200,000 in front of me, just to say one sentence: "Don't get a divorce. The highway is definitely going to be jammed," my husband said that morning, his fingers sliding quickly across his phone screen while I loaded the last Christmas gifts into the SUV's trunk. "Everyone's traveling today. Take Riverside Drive." I nodded, my mind already drifting to his family's annual Christmas gathering. The awkward small talk, his mother's loaded questions about grandchildren, the lingering, suggestive look from his father that always lasted a beat too long. The detour added 40 minutes to the drive. I remember thinking it was strange that Mark didn't complain even once about going the long way. Even when we hit construction near the old factory, he kept glancing at his phone, smiling at something I couldn't see. The urgency in the way his fingers moved told me the conversation on the other end mattered more than our safety. "Work?" I asked. "Yeah." He set the phone face down, didn't look at me. "Oh, right. Just some end-of-year things Jessica needs wrapped up." Jessica, his coworker. I'd heard that name about 700 times in the past 6 months, always spoken with admiration. I'd met her once at the company Christmas party in early December. Beautiful, magnetic, wearing a custom-tailored suit that probably cost as much as one of our mortgage payments. She shook my hand with the confidence of someone who had never been rejected in her life, and when she looked at Mark, there was something in her eyes that made me want to step between them. But I didn't, because I'm not that kind of person. I'm Anna Whitmore, the rational one, the composed one, the woman who doesn't lose her mind just because another woman is looking at her husband. We arrived at his parents' house at 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes earlier than planned, thanks to my decision to skip the last stretch of the detour and hop on the highway. The house was glowing with light, a wreath perfectly centered on the door, Christmas music drifting from somewhere inside. I glanced at Mark as I turned into the curved driveway, expecting him to gather his things, but he was staring at his phone with an expression I'd never seen before. Fear. "Anna," he said, his voice strange and tight. "Can you go in first? I need to make a quick call. Urgent work stuff." It was Christmas Eve. What kind of emergency could possibly— But I didn't ask, because asking would mean admitting that something was seriously wrong, and I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not on Christmas Eve. So I nodded. I got out of the car. I walked up the stone steps, carrying the gifts. His mother, Patricia, swept toward me, with her usual theatrical grace, arms wide open. "You're early. Where's Mark?" "On a work call. He'll be right in." Patricia's smile faltered for a split second. Then she recovered, as always, guiding me deeper into the house where his father, Mr. Wilder, held court by the fireplace, talking with Mark's younger brother Andrew and his wife Amanda. I made the rounds, hugs, kisses, answering the same questions I'd answered for a decade. Yes, school was fine. No, we weren't traveling for the holidays. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Mark still hadn't come in. I excused myself to use the bathroom, but really, I was going to check on Mark. Maybe the call had run long. Maybe I just needed an excuse to step out of the performance for a moment and remember how to breathe. I turned back toward the foyer, past the formal dining room, where Patricia and Amanda were arranging appetizers, the house sprawling, one of those old Victorian mansions Mark had grown up in. That's when I heard his voice. He was in the sunroom, the glass extension at the back of the house where Patricia grew her prized roses and hosted afternoon teas. The door was slightly ajar, and through the gap I heard Mark talking. I should have spoken up. I should have called out, made noise, let him know I was there. But something in his voice stopped me cold. It was the voice he used with me when we were 22 and believed in forever. Soft, intimate, full of secrets meant for only one person. I know," he was saying. And he was laughing, truly laughing, in a way I hadn't heard in years. "It's our baby. You can't give it up." My hand gripped the doorframe. Are you sure? Just get through Christmas. I'll file for divorce, Mark said. I could hear the smile in his voice. But everyone's here. Everyone's happy. And honestly, I want to celebrate. I want people to know. A pause. Movement. Then Mark spoke again, his voice lower, gentler in a way that shattered something inside me. Does James know you're pregnant? Are you sure? The words hung in the air like snow that hadn't decided whether to fall or melt. Another woman was pregnant with my husband's child. He was about to become a father. I don't remember when I stepped back. I don't remember grabbing my coat from the closet, or finding my keys, or what excuse I gave to anyone who asked where I was going. What I remember is this. Cold air slapped my face when I stepped outside. My hands shook as I started the car. My mind went completely silent as I drove away from the house, filled with warm lights and Christmas music, and my husband's happy laughter still echoing in my ears. I drove for 2 hours with no destination, just following roads I half remembered, half forgot in this town. Past the hotel where Mark and I first met at a community fundraiser, past the cafe where we had our first date, past the small church where we got married. The streets were empty. Most families were inside, gathered around trees and fireplaces, making memories they would talk about for years. And I was out here, driving alone in the dark, trying to remember the signs I had ignored. The late nights at the office, the new clothes, the way he no longer touched me in bed, no longer asked about my day, no longer showed up in the small ways marriages are built. The way he said Jessica's name, I had seen it all. I just chose not to understand what it meant. My phone vibrated once, twice, dozens of times in a row. I didn't look. I couldn't bear to see the excuses or explanations or accusations waiting for me. Instead, I kept driving until I found myself at Riverside Park, the park where Mark and I used to walk when we still belonged to each other. I parked in an empty lot and sat there, watching the streetlights reflect off the frozen water, and the anger came first, hot, sharp, and righteous. How dare he? How dare he throw away our 10-year marriage? Then came the pain, heavy and suffocating, for the life I thought we had, and the future I believed we were building. And finally, beneath it all, there was something else, something colder, clearer, and infinitely more dangerous than anger or grief. Clarity. My husband was having an affair. His mistress was pregnant with his child, and he was worried James would find out. James. Who was James? Then I started the car and drove home. Not to my in-laws' house, but to the 3-bedroom vintage-style home that Mark and I bought 5 years ago, in a quiet neighborhood full of young families and retired couples. The house with a mortgage in my name, with gutters I had paid to have cleaned just a few days earlier. I packed a suitcase. Not everything, just enough for a few weeks. Clothes, personal items, my laptop, the photo album from our 10th anniversary trip, when we promised we would travel more, live more intentionally, really choose each other. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee machine Mark had given me for my birthday last year, and then I left. I checked into a downtown hotel, the kind meant for long-term business travelers and people whose lives had temporarily fallen apart. The front desk clerk didn't ask anything, just handed me the key card and pointed to the elevators. A small room. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally turned on my phone. 47 messages, 19 missed calls, all from Mark. I opened the messages. The first few were calm. Where did you go? Then worried. Anna, everyone's asking where you are. Is everything okay? Then panic. Please answer the phone. I'm really worried. And the last message, sent 20 minutes ago. We need to talk. I typed a reply, deleted it, typed again, deleted it again. What was there to say? In the end, I chose a simple sentence. I'm busy with something. I'll call you later. I sent it before I could hesitate, before the questions spilled out. Then I powered off the phone, lay flat on the unfamiliar bed, and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow, Mark's family would gather around the table and realize I wasn't coming back. Tomorrow, they would have to explain my absence. Tomorrow, Mark would have to decide when to hand me the divorce papers. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, I chose myself. And I knew I only had a few days to prepare for what was coming next. The next morning, I woke up in silence. Not the gentle silence of a weekend morning back home, making coffee, standing in the kitchen, watching sunlight spill through the window. This was a different kind of silence. Heavier, thicker, the kind that exists in the space where one life has just ended and another hasn't begun yet. The hotel room was dark, only a thin line of light slipping through the curtains. My powered-off phone lay on the nightstand like a bomb I wasn't ready to detonate. As morning settled in, I let myself think about the details from the night before that had been too shocking to fully register. 3 weeks pregnant. The timeline formed in my mind with brutal clarity. 3 weeks ago was the first week of December, the company Christmas party. The night Mark came home close to 2 in the morning, the smell of expensive wine still clinging to his clothes, saying everyone had been kept late to celebrate results. I had been asleep. I hadn't asked anything else. The next morning, he took a long shower. Was it that night? Or were there other nights too? One question bred another, stacking on top of each other, until I realized I wasn't looking for answers to ease the pain anymore. I just wanted to know exactly when this marriage had ended. I forced myself out of bed, showered, and put back on the clothes I had rushed into the suitcase. The sweater Mark had given me 2 Christmases ago, when we were still trying to look like we cared about each other. It was 7:23 a.m. on Christmas morning. Somewhere, children were waking up to stuffed stockings and toys, and parents were still pretending magic existed. And me, I turned my phone back on. Messages flooded in immediately. But I didn't read Mark's first. I read the message from my brother-in-law sent the night before. "Where did you go?" Mark's really worried. "Is everything okay?" So he hadn't told them anything yet, still playing the confused husband who didn't understand why his wife had disappeared. I scrolled. My mother-in-law had sent 3 messages, each sharper than the last, demanding I call her immediately. The final one: "This behavior is unacceptable on Christmas Eve." I almost laughed, almost called her, almost told her what her son had done, with whom, and that her son had already let me know she was about to have a grandchild. Almost asked her if that met her standard of acceptable. But I didn't, because that would have been an emotional reaction, the way I used to respond. The woman who believed honest conversations could fix anything. The version of me in that hotel room on Christmas morning was learning a different lesson. Silence is power. Every minute I didn't reply, didn't explain, didn't defend myself, was a minute they had to sit with their own unease. Every hour that passed, Mark had to keep performing the role of the worried husband, had to answer harder and harder questions, had to hold a secret while his family's suspicion slowly grew. I wasn't ready to give Mark the relief of hearing back from me, so I opened my laptop and did the only thing that made me feel like I still had control over something. I researched. State divorce law required 6 months of separation before finalizing the process. Assets weren't split evenly, but equitably. The court would look at who contributed what to the marriage. I read each line slowly, taking notes on the important parts, as if I were preparing for a lecture I wasn't allowed to get wrong. We had joint accounts, joint savings, a house in my name. Mark had been earning more than I had since his promotion 3 months ago, but I was the one who managed our household finances, paid the bills, tracked spending, kept everything within budget, while he focused entirely on his career. A career that included Jessica. I opened the bank statements. The numbers that had once felt familiar suddenly looked foreign. Hotels, upscale restaurants, spas, lingerie stores, small charges, but repeated, deliberate. Not mistakes, not random. A parallel life funded by our shared money. The evidence had been there for a long time. I just hadn't looked at it in this light before. I opened Mark's company website and scrolled to the executive team page. Jessica's photo filled the screen. Confident smile, polished bio. Married, according to the brief description. I wondered where her husband was on this Christmas morning. Had he discovered his wife's betrayal, her pregnancy with another man's child, the way I had? I opened Jessica's LinkedIn. The past 6 months. Post after post. Company events, conferences, holiday parties. And in a few photos, she was always standing a little closer to Mark than necessary, smiling a little wider, leaning in just a bit. Body language saying the things I'd trusted too much to read. But in a few other photos, she did the exact same thing with another man. That was what had kept me from suspecting anything. I took screenshots, saved everything into a folder labeled Documents. Then I opened a new file and began writing down exactly every detail I could remember from the night before. The conversation I'd overheard, the timing, every word, 3 weeks pregnant, our baby. I wrote carefully, methodically, the instinct of someone used to working with facts. I didn't let emotion slip into the sentences. Only data, things Mark wouldn't be able to twist or reinterpret later when he tried to convince me I'd misunderstood, that I was overreacting. By 10 a.m., I had 5 pages of notes and a growing sense that I needed help to navigate this. I searched for divorce lawyers in the area. One name stood out: Helen Thornton. Her website emphasized experience with infidelity cases and high conflict disputes. The office was closed for the holiday, but there was an emergency line. I didn't call. Not yet. Calling a lawyer would make this real in a way I wasn't ready for. Hunger reminded me I hadn't eaten since the afternoon before. The hotel offered a simple breakfast. I went downstairs, picked up a plate of food I didn't really want, and sat alone in the nearly empty dining area. Families filtered out. Excited children, tired parents, elderly couples moving slowly but steadily, everyone heading toward a Christmas meal somewhere. Last night couldn't have been easy. The voice came from beside me. I looked up. A strange man was standing there. Early 40s, neatly dressed in a tailored suit, sharp eyes. I recognized him immediately. He was the other man Jessica appeared close to in those photos. "Are you Anna Whitmore?" he asked, his tone calm. My heart stalled. "Can I help you?" I replied. "I need to talk to you, about Mark." I nodded. We sat at a table near the window, right in the hotel's breakfast area. He placed a business card on the table. "James Carter. I'm Jessica Vance's husband," he said plainly. "My wife has been having an affair with your husband for more than 6 months. No preamble, no softening." I took a deep breath. I already knew, but hearing it from someone else still made my hands shake. James opened his briefcase and took out a thick envelope. Inside were photographs. I opened it with trembling hands. It was them, Mark and Jessica. "I hired a private investigator," James said, his voice steady. "I followed them long enough to be sure." He explained each photo in detail. October 15th, a restaurant near Grand Central. October 22nd, Bryant Park. November 3rd, a movie theater in Times Square. November the 17th, a hotel on the Upper East Side. Dates and locations carefully documented. This wasn't a brief affair. They were meeting regularly, maintaining a relationship. The most recent photo was from last week. They had spent 4 hours together at that Upper East Side hotel. The last image showed their 2 cars parked side by side in the hotel garage, their backs as they walked inside. It was undeniable proof. "Why are you showing me this?" I finally managed to ask. Mr. Carter took another sip of coffee and said, "You and I were both betrayed. I think you have the right to know." He continued, "According to the investigator's report, their relationship has lasted over 6 months. They meet at least 2 or 3 times a week and have been to hotels more than 5 times." The numbers were precise. Cold facts marking exactly how long we had been deceived. "At first, I planned to confront my wife," he said, "but I changed my mind." "This is between the 2 of you," I replied. Mr. Carter's expression hardened. I could feel the restrained anger. Your husband is responsible too. He is a married man involved with another woman. My wife is also a married woman who cheated. He's right. Mark and Jessica are both at fault. They are married people who chose to enter a relationship with someone else. I looked at the photos. I looked at the man across from me, who understood exactly how I felt. We weren't enemies. We were victims of the same truth. Did you know? He asked. I nodded. I overheard it yesterday. She's pregnant. Pregnant? He repeated, as if he couldn't believe it. We sat in silence for a moment, each of us absorbed in our own pain. A quiet understanding formed between two people carrying the same weight. Honestly, at first I was furious. At your husband, Mr. Carter said. I understand. I was furious at Jessica, too, the woman who seduced my husband. That's what I thought at first, he continued. But then I realized my wife is just as guilty. She got involved with a married man. They were both wrong. He was right. Mark was wrong, and Jessica was wrong. It wasn't one person's fault. It was a relationship they built together, and they both betrayed their families. What are you going to do? Mr. Carter asked. After a long silence, I answered, I'm going to get a divorce. Mr. Carter nodded. So am I. We looked at each other. I'll give you my number. If you need anything, contact me anytime. He handed me another card with his personal number. I gave him mine as well. Then he placed a black briefcase on the table. It was filled with stacks of $100 bills. My breath caught and my heart started pounding. I didn't understand what was happening. $100,000. Right now. Don't file for divorce, James said. I couldn't believe my ears. He was offering $100,000 and telling me not to divorce. It made no sense. What are you talking about? I asked. James began to explain calmly. $200,000 for 3 months. I'm waiting for the moment of maximum legal damage. To let them sink deeper. To let them leave more evidence behind. This is calculation, not emotion. Strategy. James didn't want revenge. He wanted to respond in the most legally perfect way. If we act now, they'll panic briefly, but soon they'll come up with excuses. They'll say it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. But if we give it time and gather more evidence, there will be no room for excuses. It made sense. But there was still something I didn't understand. So why did he need me not to divorce? James took a sip of coffee and answered, If you start divorce proceedings first, my plan collapses. My wife will find out. Then they'll destroy evidence and be more careful. I understood. If I acted first, Mark would get nervous. That would reach Jessica, and both of them would become cautious. It would interfere with James's evidence gathering. James's gaze sharpened. This isn't an offer, it's a request for cooperation. I looked at the briefcase again. $100,000. It was a huge sum, but I felt resistance. It meant I would have to live in the same house with Mark, pretend I didn't know. It meant sleeping next to a liar every night. Honestly, it's hard for me, too. It's painful to see my wife every day and pretend I don't know, but I endure it so it can end the right way. Emotion slipped into James' voice. He was struggling, too. We were sharing the same pain, and through it, he was collecting evidence and building a plan. Divorcing early actually benefits the people who did wrong. If you file now, assets will be split 50-50, and you won't receive much spousal support. But if we build undeniable proof of marital breakdown, everything changes. He explained the legal side. He had clearly consulted a lawyer. We let their relationship deepen. Let them travel together, start living together, let the pregnancy progress. It might take less than 3 months. Chilling. Calculated. But he wasn't wrong. The more evidence, the clearer the relationship, the stronger the legal advantage. That was James's goal. The $200,000 compensates you for the time you have to endure, and it's also my thank you for your cooperation in my plan. So, what happens after 3 months? I asked. James answered plainly. We file simultaneously, same day, same hour. We both file for divorce and sue the third party for infidelity. They won't have time to react. That's the strategy. He was like a soldier, a planner, someone who prepared everything and prioritized reason over emotion. Okay, I said. I'll wait 3 months. James exhaled in relief. He pushed the briefcase toward me. I took it. It was heavy. Not because of the money, but because of the decision I had just made. From now on, I would have to play the role of the normal wife for 3 more months. It wasn't until I returned to the hotel room that I opened Mark's messages. The number had gone up, 63 texts. I scrolled to the most recent one, sent less than 20 minutes ago. Anna, please, I know you're reading this. I don't know what you heard, but you need to let me explain what you think you heard. I kept reading. Come home so we can talk. Everyone's worried. My mother is barely holding it together. My father is talking about calling the police because he thinks you're missing. This isn't fair to them. I read it 3 times. Not to hope, but to analyze. Every sentence, every choice of words. The way I used to ask my students to read historical documents. Pay attention not only to what is said, but to what is carefully avoided. Mark hadn't realized what I knew. He was probing. He kept insisting there was more to it, that I didn't know everything, that I had misunderstood. And then he pulled his parents into it, turned their panic into leverage, suggested that my absence was the real problem, that I was ruining their Christmas, that I was responsible for other people's feelings, for his family's discomfort, for their inability to explain why I had disappeared. Betrayal wrapped in the language of concern. I typed a reply. I'm safe, just handling a few things. I'll be home soon. That was all. No apology, no explanation, no reassurance. I sent it and set the phone down, letting it rest on the table. I drove home. On the way, I stared out the window, letting the city slide past like a distant backdrop. A brief thought crossed my mind, like I had just signed an unspoken agreement, as if I had traded my endurance for money. But the feeling didn't bother me. On the contrary, I had never felt clearer. I had a precise objective: endure for 3 months. During that time, Mark would know nothing. Neither would Jessica. They would keep meeting, keep deepening their relationship, and exactly 3 months later, we would file at the same time. Only then would Mark and Jessica understand how closely they had been watched. I arrived home. I hid the briefcase deep in the closet, in a corner Mark never touched. I stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back at me looked unfamiliar, not because her face had changed, but because her eyes had. I was no longer a wife who trusted without question. I was a woman with a plan, with purpose. And I was preparing for the day I would face Mark with the truth. A cautious alliance began, a collaboration between James and me. The next morning, I had to return to the role of the normal wife, pretending I knew nothing, suspected nothing. It was harder than I expected. Morning. Mark was getting ready for work, wearing his familiar shirt and tie. I set the breakfast table, scrambled eggs and toast, an ordinary breakfast. Thanks, Mark said. I smiled, trying to make it look natural. Neither of us mentioned that Christmas night, like an unspoken agreement, and he noticed nothing. He ate comfortably. Working late again today? I asked, as I always did. Mark nodded. Yeah, project deadline next week. Hang in there a bit longer, okay? It was a lie. I knew the project had ended last month. James had told me, but I pretended not to know. I just smiled and nodded. Mark left for work. I heard the front door close. In that moment, my smile vanished. I looked at the leftover dishes on the table. Bitter. This was my daily life now, a wife making breakfast for a liar. I washed the dishes and cleaned the house, moving through routines as usual. But part of my mind kept asking, where is Mark right now? With whom? What are they saying? In the afternoon, James texted. The message was very short. Tonight, 7 p.m., restaurant near Grand Central. Just the location. No emotion, I replied. Understood. As agreed, We exchanged only data. If anyone accidentally saw it, there would be nothing suspicious. Evening came. I ate alone. Turned on the TV, but didn't hear anything. I checked the clock. At this hour, Mark was sitting across from Jessica, talking and laughing. My phone vibrated. A message from James. A photo taken through the restaurant window. Mark and Jessica sitting opposite each other, wine glasses on the table. My heart tightened. Knowing was one thing. Seeing it with my own eyes was another. But I held myself back. This wasn't the time for emotion. This was the time to gather evidence. The days that followed repeated the same pattern. Morning, I made breakfast. Evening, I ate alone. Mark grew more relaxed. His guard slowly dropped. On the weekend, Mark said he was going to the gym. I knew it was a lie. But I let him go. I even told him to have a good workout. He left the house lighthearted. I texted James. Husband left the house at 10:30. The reply came immediately. Wife left the house at 10 o'clock. That meant they would meet in the afternoon. James called me, his voice careful. Can you talk now? I looked around. I was home alone. Yes. I recorded something important, James said. I saw them go into a law office, then go together into an apartment. Not a hotel. An apartment. Not a hotel. It sounded more permanent. Longer term. Can you check whose name the lease is under? James asked. I said I would check. After hanging up, I went into Mark's study. Opened drawers. Bank statements. Credit card bills. Insurance papers. In the bottom drawer, I found a lease agreement. An apartment in Long Island City. Tenant, Mark. Lease signed 2 months ago. I photographed all the documents with my phone and sent them to James. The reply came quickly. This is key evidence. A private space rented to maintain the relationship. Clear proof of marital breakdown. That evening, Mark came home in sweaty gym clothes. A performance. He went to shower. I prepared dinner. How was your workout? I asked, like a normal question. Pretty intense, but I feel lighter, he replied. I nodded, smiling as if I believed him. Mark ate dinner looking relaxed. That night, Mark fell asleep quickly. Was he tired or mentally relieved? Believing his wife suspected nothing? I couldn't sleep. I watched Mark lying beside me, the man I had lived with for 10 years, the man who had gone to see a lawyer that very morning, already ready to build a new life without me. The following weeks passed in the same rhythm. I saw Mark off to work every morning and ate dinner alone. We spent weekends separately. On the outside, we were a normal couple, but inside everything was different. Mark kept coming home late. Company parties, business trips. I knew about Mark's lies, his relationship with Jessica, the existence of the apartment. I knew everything. And James knew too. I knew Mark had gone to see a lawyer to prepare for divorce, but I hadn't received court papers yet. Through James, I knew Jessica was plotting to get James to transfer half the shares. But he was still stalling by claiming a business trip to Asia, when in reality, he was staying at a hotel not far from home. One evening, James called. Mark was busy with work. I have a proposal, James said. I plan to put a tracking device on my wife's car. I asked about the legal issue. James said he had checked with a lawyer. Between spouses, it wasn't illegal. That meant I could do the same. A few days later, James gave me a small magnetic device. After Mark left the house, I went down to the garage and attached it under the car, in a hard-to-detect spot. From that day on, Mark's every movement appeared on an app on my phone. Office, restaurants, apartment, hotels. James also attached a device to Jessica's car. When the two signals overlapped, I received a notification. The data kept accumulating. I sent everything to my lawyer: photos, lease agreement, GPS logs. A few seconds later, he replied, "This is excellent evidence. With this amount, we have a very high chance of winning." My lawyer's words reassured me. I was confident we were preparing the right way. One Wednesday morning, Mark woke up earlier than usual. He looked a little restless, holding his coffee cup without drinking, his eyes checking the clock again and again. "I have an early meeting today," he said, his voice trying to sound normal, but I could hear the tension underneath. I nodded, smiling gently. "Make sure you eat something. Don't skip breakfast." He kissed my cheek quickly and left the house. The door slammed shut, and I immediately opened the GPS app. His car was heading toward downtown, not the office. I texted James. "Mark left at 8:15 a.m., heading toward Manhattan." The reply came fast. "Jessica is heading that way too. They said they have a client meeting today. The investigator is following." 30 minutes later, photos arrived. An obstetrics and gynecology clinic. I stared at the screen for a long time. The address was clear, impossible to misread. A medical building, the doctor's name displayed right out front. I didn't reply right away. I stood in the kitchen, my hands still resting in the sink, water running over clean plates. An ordinary image. Familiar. A wife standing in her kitchen, while her husband was sitting in a clinic, waiting to hear the heartbeat of a child not with her. The next photo. Mark sitting beside Jessica, his shoulder tilted slightly toward her, his hand resting on the back of her chair, in a gesture I knew well, a gesture he used to make with me in similar waiting rooms years ago when I still believed we were building a family. Jessica wore a loose coat. One hand rested on her stomach, the unconscious reflex of women who have begun to feel the changes inside their bodies. Mark leaned down and said something. I wasn't there, but I saw his mouth curve into a small smile. A quiet smile, not showy. The smile of a man who believes he is living a real life. They looked like a legitimate couple. James sent another line. 3 months. The doctor says the pregnancy is stable. I sat down at the kitchen chair. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just felt a very clear emptiness in my chest, as if someone had finally taken away the last piece of hope, something I hadn't even realized I was still holding. James called. "This is the decisive evidence," he said. "The court won't see this as suspicion anymore. They're building another family together." I closed my eyes for a few seconds. The image of Mark standing in that clinic wouldn't leave my mind. The way he stood up when the nurse called the name. The way he pulled out a chair for Jessica. Small actions, ordinary, real. Things he hadn't done for me in the past 2 years. I showed this to my lawyer. He said, "Our chance of winning is over 95%. James said that was enough. I thought so too. I want to end this. 3 months, a stable pregnancy. The truth, on its own, was already heavy enough. We had everything we needed. Photos, videos, financial statements, GPS data, security cameras. The scattered pieces from before had now been assembled into a complete picture, with no gaps left to deny. "I'll file next week," James said. "Are you ready?" "I'm ready." 2 months had passed. 2 months of playing the wife who knew nothing. It was time to end it. Not with anger, but through legal procedure. "It's best if we do it on the same day," James continued. "If the filings go in simultaneously, they won't have time to react." It was a strategic calculation. If one person moved first, the other would give the couple time to maneuver, prepare excuses, or hide more traces. But if both acted at the same moment, there would be no breathing room at all. "How about Monday?" James suggested. It was Friday, 3 days away. "Monday works," I said. "Then Monday, exactly 10 a.m., James said. "Each of us files through our own lawyer." Everything was set. James had finalized all his documents with his attorney. So had I. I reviewed the draft complaint prepared by my lawyer, Helen Thornton, line by line, clause by clause. "After filing, it will take a few days for the court to serve the papers," James said. "They should receive them around Wednesday." That meant Mark would receive the court documents on Wednesday. 2 sets of papers, one for the divorce, one for the lawsuit related to the woman he was living with. "I want to see his face then, after they realize they'll both be fired from my company," James said, a faint smile crossing his face. I understood that feeling. I also wanted to know what Mark would look like when he realized that I knew everything. That for the past 2 months, while he thought he was safe, I had been quietly documenting, storing, and preparing. Monday morning. I woke up earlier than usual. Today was a special day, the day I would go to Helen Thornton's office to sign the complaints and file them with the court. When I arrived, Miss Thornton was waiting for me in the conference room. She asked, "Are you ready?" I nodded. Ready. It was time to begin. "There are 2 cases," Miss Thornton explained, pointing to the stack of documents on the table. "One divorce case and one third-party lawsuit. The complaints have been prepared carefully. The divorce names your husband, Mark Whitmore. The other names Jessica Vance." She turned page by page, explaining the legal grounds, the requested alimony and damages, and the asset division. The legal language was dense, but the meaning was clear. We were seeking $50,000 in damages from my husband and $30,000 from the mistress. As for assets, we were requesting a 60-40 split in my favor. Not the standard 50-50, because responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage lay with Mark. I deserved the larger share. I signed in multiple places. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from relief that it was finally ending. The evidence had been compiled. Photos, videos, GPS logs, financial records. Everything was attached. At the same time, James would be at his own lawyer's office signing his filings. 10 a.m. arrived. Miss Thornton sat at her computer, logged into the court's electronic filing system. A few clicks, the documents were uploaded. A confirmation appeared, filed. The court would review and serve the papers. It was done. It had begun. The cases were officially underway. I left the office and texted James. Filed. The reply came quickly. Same here. Now we wait. Tuesday passed, then Wednesday. I received a call from Miss Thornton. The papers had been served. They would receive them tomorrow. Tomorrow, Mark would receive the court documents. Mark had no idea, about to receive the biggest shock of his life. Thursday afternoon. My phone rang. It was Mark. His voice was panicked. "Anna, where are you? Are you home?" he asked. I said I was. "I'm coming home now. Don't go anywhere." He hung up. His voice was shaking. He had received the papers, delivered to his office that morning. He finally knew. 30 minutes later, the front door burst open. Mark rushed in, face pale. He was holding the envelope stamped by the court. "What the hell is this?" he shouted. Normally he was quiet, but now his voice was loud with panic. I answered calmly. "Just what you wanted. Divorce papers?" Mark stared at me in disbelief. He opened the documents and read, his face stiffening. "You're also suing Jessica Vance," I added. Mark's head snapped up, his eyes wide. "How could you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He couldn't understand how I knew about Jessica, how I had gathered the evidence. "I knew since Christmas night. I knew everything." Mark seemed to remember that day. His expression froze. "I started documenting everything from then on. Your lies, the meetings, the apartment lease, the prenatal visits, all of it." Mark said nothing. There was nothing left to say. He collapsed onto the sofa, the papers slipping from his hand. He knew he couldn't deny it. Jessica's husband knows too. He probably filed today as well. Mark jumped up, grabbed his phone, and called Jessica. She didn't answer. He called again, straight to voicemail. She wasn't picking up. "She's probably facing her husband right now," I said. James must have confronted Jessica today, lawsuit in hand. Mark sat back down, clutching his head. He was processing the reality of being completely exposed, every piece of evidence already collected. "Why?" I asked. I genuinely wanted to know why the man I had lived with for 10 years chose someone else. After a long silence, he finally spoke. He said he was sorry. That was it. An apology, no explanation. He couldn't give one because there was none. His phone rang. "Jessica." Mark answered. "Yeah, it's me. You got them too?" "Yeah, What do we do now?" His voice was frantic. Jessica had been served as well. They were in the same situation. He hung up, looking lost. A week passed. I heard from Ms. Thornton. Your husband's lawyer reached out. They want to negotiate a settlement. That was expected. They knew they would lose in court. What are their terms? I asked. $30,000 in damages and a 50-50 asset split, Ms. Thornton replied. Too low. I demanded $50,000 in damages and a 60-40 split. If they don't agree, we go to trial. Ms. Thornton nodded. We would stand firm. A few days later, James reported the same. My wife also proposed a settlement, but the terms are ridiculous. She wants everything split down the middle. He refused as well. With evidence this clear, there was no reason to compromise. They've started turning on each other, James said. When I asked what he meant, he explained, My wife is blaming your husband. She says he pursued her, that she tried to refuse, but he persisted. Ridiculous, but that's her excuse. My husband was saying the same thing, that Jessica initiated everything, that he tried to resist. They were shifting blame, trying to paint themselves as victims. I couldn't help but laugh. A bitter, pathetic laugh. The people who once claimed to love each other and were expecting a child together were now attacking one another. Another month passed. No settlement was reached. Neither Mark nor Jessica would accept responsibility. We went to court. The legal battle began, two families collapsing at the same time. Mark and Jessica once claimed they loved each other, but now they were tearing each other apart. Watching the guilty unravel was bitter. There was no joy in revenge, only a sense of finality. Now the law would decide who was at fault and who would be held responsible. The trial dragged on. Each time I sat in the courtroom, it felt surreal. Facing the man I had lived with for 10 years as opposing parties was something I had never imagined. In the first session, Mark's lawyer tried to deny the evidence, claiming the photos were misleading angles and the GPS overlaps were coincidences. But when Ms. Thornton presented the security footage, they fell silent. It couldn't be denied. The video clearly showed them entering and leaving the apartment together. In the second session, Jessica was called as a witness. Her voice shaking, she testified that Mark pursued her and that she was a victim. But when James's lawyer presented the apartment lease she had co-signed and the visibly progressing pregnancy, she couldn't speak. The judge stated, "The evidence is irrefutable. Responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage by the defendants is established." It was a cold ruling based on facts, not emotion. Mark sat with his head down. The verdict came a month later. The written judgment was delivered from the court. Ms. Thornton called me right after reviewing the judgment. Her voice came through the phone, firm and satisfied. "Anna, we won. The ruling is almost entirely in your favor." I sat down on the sofa, gripping the phone tightly, waiting for her to read the details. Total damages of $85,000, $60,000 from Mark, and $25,000 from Jessica. Asset division at 60-40 in your favor. The house, savings, retirement funds, the majority go to you. The court recognized full responsibility for the breakdown of the marriage on Mark's part and Jessica's interference in the marriage. I was silent for a moment, letting the numbers sink in. $85,000 wasn't money. It was the legal value placed on 10 years of betrayal, on the nights I pretended to sleep beside a liar, on the breakfasts I cooked while knowing he had just listened to his child's heartbeat with another woman. Ms. Thornton continued, "Mark and Jessica will also have to cover court costs and legal fees. They won't be able to appeal. The evidence is too clear." I heard about them a few weeks later, through James. Mark lost his job. An affair scandal with a subordinate employee, combined with using company funds for a love nest. He resigned before James officially fired him, but his reputation was already destroyed. Jessica, too. She lost her job, moved back in with her parents in the suburbs, carrying a child about to be born without the father by her side. I didn't feel joy, just a cold sense of justice, like snow falling outside a January window. They once thought they were clever, building a secret home, going to prenatal appointments hand in hand, dreaming of a new future. Now that home was empty, their reputations gone, and the child about to be born would grow up with a story of parents who lost everything over a moment of recklessness stretched too long. I sold the old house, the place once full of memories, now only a burden. With the larger share of the assets plus the damages, I bought a small apartment downtown, high floor, large windows overlooking the Hudson River. Morning sunlight flooded the kitchen, with no trace of Mark. I chose the furniture myself, a light gray sofa, a pale wood table, nothing carrying the marks of the past. This was my home, mine alone. Everything changed. Waking up early, making coffee, sitting by the window, working in silence. Evening yoga, reconnecting with old friends I had lost touch with out of shame over my broken marriage. They hugged me and said, "You're so strong, Anna." I smiled, for the first time a truly light smile. One spring afternoon, I received a message from James. We had stayed quietly in touch, like two survivors of the same storm. "Coffee?" he asked. We met at the old cafe, where everything had begun. He looked different. Lighter, hair cut short, a genuine smile. He told me about his new life. "And you?" I told him about the new apartment, about mornings filled with sunlight through the windows. We didn't talk much about Mark or Jessica. They had become the past. Instead, we talked about the future. He told me about a cooking class he was taking. I told him about a trip to Italy I was planning for the summer. When we parted, he held my hand for a moment. "Thank you, Anna." I went home as the sun set, the Hudson glowing orange. I stood by the window, holding a glass of red wine, watching the city shimmer. 10 years of marriage weren't erased. They were the harshest lesson I'd ever received. But now, I was Anna Whitmore, no longer anyone's wife. I had my own apartment, a job I loved, real friends, and a peace no one could take away. I no longer hated Mark or Jessica. They had punished themselves with their own choices. And me, I chose myself, chose dignity, chose to live honestly. I took a sip of wine and smiled at my reflection in the window glass. This Christmas, I will hang a small wreath on my door. I'll turn on music, make hot cocoa, and sit by the window watching the snow fall. No more pain, only peace and hope.